Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Off the Rack, conversations on transformative leadership with yours truly, Walt Rakowich. So if you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. And if you're returning, hey, welcome back. I'm thrilled to introduce my guest today, Garry Gilliam. Garry is a leader of many talents and a champion with many hats. As a former NFL player, business leader, entrepreneur, visionary, and community advocate. And we're going to talk about Garry's story, the formative years that led to his first career on the field, and how those experiences informed his later focus on the social issues in his hometown. Garry played for my favorite college team, the Penn State Nittany Lions, and then he went pro with the Seattle Seahawks and later the San Francisco 49ers. But then Garry later put his Penn State degree to work by launching The Bridge, which is an organization that acquires and develops properties like schools, malls, even warehouses, and then turns them into eco-villages in the inner city. The properties are intended to be totally sustainable and self-contained mixed-use communities with housing, commercial real estate, retail space, co-working centers, urban agriculture, education, entertainment, you name it. The Bridge is a world-class model, in my view, for other communities. And as many of you know, I have actually talked about my personal involvement in trying to change lives in the inner city. So I'm really especially interested in hearing what he has to say. Garry, I'm really excited to have our chat today, and we got a lot in common, and you're doing some awesome things.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
All right, Garry. So before we get started, I got to ask you one personal question. You graduated from Penn State, so did I, and you must have eaten at the Creamery before it, before it moved, actually. And by the way, this is an establishment, so everybody knows, since like the 1880s. So what's your most favorite ice cream there, Garry?
I am a huge fan of chocolate chip cookie dough.
Oh my gosh, that's the same thing. Okay, good. That is fabulous. That's my favorite. Although I will say the alumni swirl is pretty doggone good too if you like blueberry.
I'll be honest, I didn't sway too much from the chocolate chip cookie dough because when I tried it, I was like, oh, this is it. I don't need to try anything else anymore. This is definitely my favorite.
Isn't that the best? Oh, that's great. All right, Garry, let's get into your childhood. So your mom made what she calls the most difficult decision in her life when you were 8 years old. And you grew up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it was tough for a young African American male, and even more so because you had a single mom. And education was a challenge. I think you told me when we first talked that the school district you were in was like ranked 496 out of 498 or something. Can you tell us about the decision that she had to make and your first day at what was Milton Hershey School?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you stated, mom and I were below the poverty line. We actually lived in some Section 8 housing. And even before I was born, when mom and the rest of the family were growing up, they were also below the poverty line. And, mom didn't like that. So she did everything in her power to find some new environments for my brother and I to develop in.
Hmm.
And in the school district that I was in, I was a talented young kid, smart, and they were trying to move me from second grade up to fourth grade, which was really the catalyst for mom to double down on finding an environment for me to be in, specifically academically. So, like you said, when I was 8, mom took me down to Hershey. We didn't go to Hershey Park. We didn't go to Chocolate World. We pulled up to Founders Hall, this big white dome,
Hmm.
walked in, grabbed a few things, left, and then went to a mansion, for lack of a better term. And there was like playgrounds and jungle gyms and basketball courts, a bunch of kids running around having a good time. And mom's like, hey, baby, go play. I got to go in here, grab a few things, and we'll head home. I was like, all right, cool. So I go play. Mom goes in. She comes out. I go to get in the car so we can go home. And she's like, no, looks like you're having a good time. I don't want to keep you from that. Keep on playing. I got to go back to Founders Hall. I'm going to grab a few things and I'll be right back to get you. It's like, all right, cool. So I'm having a good time playing on the swings. it starts getting darker and darker and darker, and my mom didn't come back. She said she would come back, left me on the playground at 8 years old, didn't come back. And this random guy comes out of the house. He's like, "Hey, Gary, it's time for you to come in and shower and get ready for bed." And I'm looking at this dude like he's crazy, talking about showers and beds. Like, I'm thinking stranger danger, like I'm out. So I took off running, to where mom said she was going to be at. And, God bless his soul, he's chasing after me like, "No, Gary, this is your home. We're your family. Your mom signed you over to us." And mom just didn't know how to tell me that she had dropped me off at a private boarding school originally founded for orphans, called Milton Hershey School by the great chocolatier Milton Hershey. So that was my intro into the school. And the first couple years, as you could imagine, confused, feeling abandoned. Did I do something wrong? Did I do something right? Do I get to see my family again? It was tough, crying myself to sleep those first 2 years, looking at a picture of mom, smelling a perfume box, but I eventually started to get through it, immerse myself in what the school had to offer, and that helped tremendously.
Wow. Uh, and then, so you were there for a couple of years, and then I think you told me your mother got back in touch with you. You had an equally important decision to make when you were in fifth grade to stay at the school.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And just for the record, I was able to see my mom on the weekends and on holidays. She made it a point to come see me, so it wasn't like I never got to see her again. And to this day, we do have a great relationship. But there did come a point in about fifth grade when mom was like, "Hey, baby, look, we've saved up some money. We're not in as bad of a living situation anymore. If you don't want to be here at the school anymore, you don't have to be here." And by that point, I had realized why I was at the school, what the school was for, the types of resources and opportunities they were providing to kids like myself. So I remember looking her right in her face and said, "Look, Mom, I'm going to stay here. My education is much more important than your tears. I'll see you next weekend. Like, I'm going to stay here. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is what's best for not just myself, but I do believe our family as well."
Wow. Best, and looking back, probably the best decision you could have ever made, although probably not easy to make, right?
Yes, still crying every weekend. It was tough, but definitely worth it in the end.
Gary, I used to, they say that adversity is the best teacher. And it sounds to me like you took adversity when you were young and ultimately you turned it into a positive. All I would say is well done.
Thank you. They say a skilled sailor is not made on calm waters. So, yeah, my waters got choppy rather early. I had to become a skilled sailor pretty quickly, and I think it's definitely benefited me to this day.
Amen to that. Okay, so you reach your senior year in high school, and you're 6'5", 275 pounds. You're attracting Division I school attention. You excelled academically at Milton Hershey School. You played soccer, you played ice hockey, you did all kinds of stuff that you would never have done before you, and in addition to football, and you learned how to play the violin, piano, all these things. I mean, you really became well-rounded in so many things that you did. And then you said that you wanted your college degree to mean something. Can you tell us a little bit about that decision you had to make? And then maybe perhaps what you studied?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a nerd trapped in an athlete's body. And I remember it was about my sophomore year, my high school football coach, Robert Geyer, he came up to me after the season. He was like, "Look, Gary, you've clearly got good size, and I think you've got the ability to contribute at the next level, possibly as a Division I football player. Do you have any interest in any colleges right now, any universities? Do you maybe even know what conference you might want to play in?" And I'm telling you, like, I had no idea what the Big Ten was, what the Big East was. I didn't know the history of Penn State or, what Alabama was doing. Like, I had no idea about any of it. So he was like, "Look, you got some homework," which is first to just go find out which colleges and universities are in which conferences, right? And figure out maybe where you might want to go. So coming from Milton Hershey, that well-rounded person came out of what the school calls the whole child approach. So I was looking for an environment that kind of matched that. So I had a few requirements as I was looking for a university to go play for. I wanted to be close to home, right? My family is still fairly poor and can't be traveling across the country to come see me play. So that was number one. Number two, I wanted a chance to make it to the NFL. So although I had scholarships to go play at Princeton and Harvard and Yale, they're not necessarily churning out NFL players. And if I'm going to commit my body and my time to this game, I want to be compensated for it one day. But then third, and most importantly, I do need my degree to mean something, right? So I was definitely not going to go to a place like Ohio State where they're pushing shot fired. They're just pushing the athletes through. They might get a degree, they might not. It's not the standard. Now, I chose, though, to go to Penn State, and for no other reason than what Joe Paterno at the time called the grand experiment, which means not only would the university attract some of the top athletes across the nation, be a top 25 program, come tear you up on the football field, but we'd also graduate over 90% of our athletes. We'd be academic All-Americans, academic All-Big Ten players. This was a program where they check classes almost every day. And if you were not in class, then you did not get to practice. And if you're not practicing, then you're not going to play. Right. So that sounded a lot like the whole child approach, or as we called it on our basketball team in high school, the whole man concept. So while at Penn State, I actually triple majored in business development, PR and advertising, and industrial psychology, because mom taught me very early on not to just shut up and dribble, that the same things that are making me successful in sports will make me successful in other places. Penn State, Milton Hershey, watered that, and then Penn State really reinforced it. So I did everything that I could to lock in academically and finish those degrees in 4.5 years.
So you were a nerd trapped in an athlete's body. I love that. That's so good. Well, that's great. But then again, during your tenure at Penn State, you suffered a really bad knee injury. And you blew out your ACL, MCL, PCL, all these CLs. And it didn't look too good. And so maybe, athletically, tell us what was going on in your mind and what the doctor's telling you about your chances at that point.
Yeah, so it was my redshirt freshman year. I was a tight end. I had earned a starting spot, which was really tough for a redshirt freshman to do in a Joe Paterno offense. But I did what I had to do that, and had a whole fan section called Gilliam's Island, catching passes, trucking people, coming into who I was going to be as a college football player. And then, got hurt, blew out my whole knee. And that injury was supposed to just be 2 surgeries, one to fix the MCL, meniscus, patella, let that heal up, and then they were going to do the ACL, which then is another 9 months of recovery. Now, unfortunately, in between those 2 surgeries, I actually developed a staph infection inside of my bone marrow. So now not only was my career on the line, but my life was on the line. And that infection actually ended up, it kept coming back. They weren't able to beat it out. They had to get in there and surgically, start to remove some of that out of there, which all in all ended up being 5 different surgeries. And I was out of football for 2 years. And I remember after they had repaired the ACL, the doctor called me into his office and he was like, "Hey, Gil, I want to talk to you. I want you to know that your journey back is going to be really tough. Really, really, really tough." He goes, "Look, your injury is probably one of the worst that I've ever seen. You add in the complications and you might be the top." And I was like, all right, well, we knew that. We knew that it was going to be a tough recovery. And again, I'm a nerd in an athlete's body. Give me probabilities. Give me a percent chance of, can I get back to who I used to be? And Doc looks at me and he's like, "Honestly, Gary, I might give you a 10% chance to get back to who you used to be." Right. And I perked up. I was like, "Doc, 10%? Like, I'm from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I went to Milton Hershey. That's only ever had one NFL player and it's over 100 years of existence. And here I am standing in front of you, triple majoring on a full scholarship. No one in my family has ever been to college. Like, Doc, do you know what the percent chance of that happening was? Like, probably less than 1. So I'll take your 10%.
That's looking at it positively, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and I needed all of it because, again, that was 5 surgeries, out for 2 years. And then as I was coming back, unfortunately, was when Joe Paterno was fired. So then uncertainty with new coaches coming in, new offenses coming in. Will we even have a program anymore? So there was a lot going on at the time. But I was taught to just really control what I could control.
Garry, you also had a conversation with a woman by the name of Mrs. Ainsworth. And I believe she was from Milton Hershey. What did she say that inspired you at that time to persevere? I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, so in high school, I was a Sunday school teacher, what they call a junior chapel leader. So I got to share my faith and belief in God to the younger kids in the school and walk them through, some programs and things. And she was essentially my boss. She was the leader of the religious programs. She was also the wife of our athletic director at the time. So she was at all of our football games, basketball games. We had a great relationship, pretty much like a second mom to me. And there was a time, when I was going through all those complications, where I wanted to quit playing football. I felt like football was keeping me from being a whole man, which was about mind, body, spirit, and community. Right, I had gotten to the point where I was starting to skip class. Um, Mental health was depleted. I was starting to miss workouts and rehab. Wasn't contributing to my community in any significant way. So I felt like maybe if I stopped playing football, I can become a whole man again. And I knew that if I stopped playing football, I might lose my scholarship. But fortunately, Milton Hershey schools got what's called a continuing education scholarship. So I did actually have a pot of money that I could have used if I did not continue to play football. So I called back to Milton Hershey and I called Mrs. Ainsworth. And as soon as she picked up the phone, I just bursted out crying, with the woe is me. I don't want to carry this burden anymore. Like, this is too hard. Really, why me? Like, I've been a man of God. I've been a whole man. Why do I need to carry this? Like, I don't want to. And, she said a couple things, not that I hadn't heard him before, but who it was coming from, the way I was feeling, it just hit. And she goes, listen, Gary, I hear you. But remember, God gives the hardest battles to the strongest soldiers. And what you're currently going through has nothing to do with you. She goes, it'll be a testimony for the soldiers you lead one day. She said, there is an anointing on your life that you're not going to understand right now. But I promise you, if you control what you can control, your mindset, your effort, and your character, God will take care of the rest. And that's all I needed to hear. And I put my head down. I controlled what I could control. And it got hard. It got tough. It was rock bottom. And I eventually did earn my way back to get a starting spot and contribute significantly to Penn State.
Wow. Gary, I used to tell my employees that adversity leads to perseverance. Perseverance builds character, and then that leads to hope. Mm-hmm. And by the way, that is biblical. And my sense is that's what happened to you. You persevered, built your character, probably became an even stronger person for it.
I agree. So
you complete 18 months of physical rehab, make it back on the field at Penn State, as you just said, and the injury is kind of costing you some speed, which was potentially catching the attention of NFL recruiters. So you do what's most unheard of, and you switch positions near the end of your college career. Can you tell us about that decision and that time in your life and how that all panned out for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bill O'Brien was the new coach that came in, and he was bringing the offense from the New England Patriots with Tom Brady and Rob Gronkowski. So I was like the Rob Gronkowski of Penn State. And that first year, came back, earned my starting spot back, contributed in a decent way. But to your point, I had noticed that I wasn't as fast as I used to be. And I knew that if I was going to make it to the NFL, which was one of the main objectives, that I needed to separate myself. And I don't think I can separate myself as a tight end. There's a lot of very athletic tight ends across the nation. So I went to Coach O'Brien and I actually convinced him if I could switch from tight end to offensive tackle, which for anybody listening, if you're in college and you want to make it to the NFL, it's not smart to switch positions your very last year in college.
Right.
So I did, and I gained 40 pounds in 3 months, and I was able to compete and earn a starting spot, actually. But that didn't help too much, in all honesty. I had a crazy injury, switch positions. Coaches are looking at me like, this guy looks good, he smells good, or he looks good, don't smell too good. We don't know if we want to contribute, make the investment into the learning curve that he's going to need to contribute at the next level. So maybe not the smartest decision to make in the moment, but hindsight's always 20/20, and it did work out.
So you went to play for the Seattle Seahawks.
I did, yes. And when the draft came and the draft went. Not one of the teams wanted to draft me, unfortunately, but almost all of them did contact me about coming in to try out at their mini camp. And at any other point in my life, I had some requirements of where I wanted to go. I wanted to go to a team that was winning championships. I wanted to go to a team that had first round draft picks, all pros as tackles that I could learn from, a team that maybe even drafted some guys at my position that I could also learn from. And in reality, these are all things why an undrafted player probably shouldn't go to a team, right? If they're winning championships, have first round draft picks and all pros, they probably don't need you.
Right.
So my whole family is looking at me like I'm crazy. My brother's like, dude, go to the Steelers. My dad's like, go to the Cowboys. My mom's like, go to the Panthers. I love their colors. Then mom's like, you know what, baby, go wherever you want. Just please do not go to Seattle. And I was like, well, why not? And mom loves like Cold Case Files and all those mystery shows. So she was like, look, Seattle is where all the serial killers are at. And I don't want you out there.
Oh my gosh.
But I did have an opportunity. Like I said, I got invited to mini camp out there, came out to Seattle, and did my best. And honestly, my best was not very good. Like I remember watching that film from that first mini camp like a year later, and I was like, dude, I don't know what they saw in me, but I know if I was a coach, I would have cut me instantly because my job is to block people. I don't think I blocked one person. I was on the ground most of practice. In reality, they probably would have been better off just putting like an orange traffic cone at my position, and it would have did better than I did, so it was a long shot. And in that moment, I was like, there's no way that I'm going to make this team. But let me listen to what Mrs. Ainsworth said, right? Let me control what I can control, my mindset, my effort, my character, so I made sure I came in after practice and before practice every single day and just worked one-on-one with coach, got back to basics and incrementally tried to just get 1% better every single day, every single day. And by the end of training camp, I'll be honest, I still was not very good. But I think they saw the potential in me. They knew that I could one day hopefully develop into a good player. And I ended up making that team, right? Against all odds, with everything that had gone on in my life up to that point, I now had my foot in the door, and now that was the beginning of this next journey, of this next chapter in the NFL.
Unbelievable. And of course, in one of the most important games of your life, you make the catch, quote unquote, against the Packers in the NFC title game. You got to tell us about that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So my role in the team, I was so far down the depth chart as an offensive tackle that they moved me kind of back to tight end, which I had played really my whole life, and I was used to doing that. I was the big tight end, the guy who reports eligible. You hear it, oh, number 79 has reported eligible. That was me.
Right.
Yeah. And most of the time that's on like a field goal, I don't know, maybe a short yardage play, goal line play, right? So I had this very, very niche role, which allowed me to get acclimated to the game. And it was the NFC Championship game, the game right before the Super Bowl. And we're getting destroyed, 16-0 late in the third quarter. And I always had a thing that whenever we crossed half field, I would really lock in because that's where most of my plays were at. So I'd always stand right behind coach to get ready to go in the game. So coach turns around and looks at me. He's like, Gil, you ready? And I was like, yeah, we're about to kick a field goal, right? And he's like, no, Charlie Brown. And I was like, Charlie Brown? Like, there's what? We're called right now? And what Charlie Brown was, it was a fake field goal that I could score a touchdown, which is like every offensive lineman's dream to score a touchdown.
Of course.
But to make matters worse, this fake field goal, had it in every week, never called it. We only practiced it really once a week, which was in our walkthrough the day before the game. I wasn't locked in during this walkthrough, ended up running the wrong route and dropping the pass. So I'm thinking like, there's no way they're going to call this. They think that I'm not prepared for it. I'm not locked in unless we are desperate. And boy, were we desperate, right? So they called the play. The defense was lined up in the proper way. It was kind of a run pass option. The linebacker thought I was coming to block him. So he ran toward the holder, John Ryan, who then lofted it right over his head, right into my hands for a 19-yard touchdown. Bang. Which is great. It feels good to score the touchdown, but I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, nobody cares if you score a touchdown if we don't win this game.
Right. Yeah.
That touchdown, though, ended up being the catalyst for one of the greatest comebacks in NFC Championship history. Not just the deficit we overcame, but really the way that we did it. This fake field goal to myself, this offensive tackle, 2-point conversion, and in all honesty, should have been a pick six the other way. third and fourth and long conversions, an onside kick recovery, literally bounced off the dude's head right into our hands, like divinely orchestrated for us to get into overtime, to go down in the first drive, sudden death, scored, going back to the Super Bowl.
Unbelievable. Just unbelievable. What a great story, Gary. What a great story.
Thank you. And I will mention, because I'm sure people they always want to mention this, what happened at the Super Bowl, which we were there playing very well versus Tom Brady and the Patriots, and we're down on the 1 yard line.
You had him.
With one of the greatest running backs in NFL history, Marshawn Lynch, a.k.a. Beast Mode for a reason. Yep. And all we've got to do is just hand him the ball. But unfortunately, we chose to pass the ball on the 1 yard line, and it was intercepted.
Yep.
And we lost that Super Bowl. And there is no happy ending to that story.
Unbelievable. Yeah. It was exactly what people didn't expect. And unfortunately, the Patriots intercepted it, for you guys at least, intercepted it, and the game was over, right?
That was it.
Yeah. All right. Well, what a great story. Let's switch a little bit to the Bridge Eco Village. Your personal story about growing up in Harrisburg really is a powerful one. And today you're on a mission to change people's lives for the better in the inner city through, as you say, a more holistic approach to living. You call this idea the Bridge Eco Village. So can you tell us a little bit about why you launched the Bridge and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a few questions growing up. Two in particular came from when I was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And one was, where are the rest of the Milton Hershey School campuses? Like, this is a phenomenal model that's been here for a long time, impacting lives in a tremendous way. Why don't we have more of these campuses? Why is there only one in the middle of Pennsylvania, right? Why don't we have more? And then two, and moreover, I was always curious, where are the other towns like Hershey? Like, where's Coca-Cola's town and where's McDonald's town? Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, some of these family offices, where are your towns at? Because Milton Hershey realized long ago it was more than just about creating jobs and creating a chocolate factory. But he realized it was very important to create an entire ecosystem for his workers and their families, right? He created Hershey Park, Hershey Theater, Hershey Garden, Penn State Hershey Medical Center. He built homes, provided jobs. And when we talk about comprehensive planning, community and economic development, Hershey's got some of the highest property values in the state. It's got some of the lowest cancer rates in the state. It's an international destination, a global brand. It's got just a phenomenal model with one of, if not the largest educational endowments in the world, right? So when we're talking about people, planet, profit, philanthropy, perpetuity, right? This legacy we hear about, Milton Hershey and his wife laid the blueprint over 100 years ago. So why aren't these other corporations, family offices, why don't they invest intentionally into the infrastructure and education within the communities that they operate, right? So those are some questions. And then I continued, obviously went on to Penn State and the NFL. Now, the environments that I was in at Milton Hershey and Penn State, the athletes that I was around, also intelligent. We had deep conversations about things outside of athletics. Now, I get to the NFL, and that is not the case, right? These people have fully focused on athletics their whole life. They may have been pushed through math class, this class, that class. They've been told to shut up and dribble, just play football, right? Those things. So I was like, nah, I don't like that. Like, I want to have deep conversations. So we would always come in from practice or games, get in a hot tub to stretch and recover. Dudes are in there with their headphones on, scrolling on their phones. And I'd always tap them like, hey, bro. Yeah. What's the last new thing you learned not related to football? And they would look at me like, bro, what? Like, gee, you always on some extra stuff. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no, bro. You're like, you sitting there scrolling on Instagram, looking at chicks, but you can't tell me one new thing you've learned today? Like, bro, go Google something. Please teach me something. I want to learn from you, right? So we would go around the hot tub. We'd share stuff, have deep conversations. Got to the point where guys would see me in the locker room like, yo, gee, did you get in the hot tub yet? Like, I learned something I want to share with you. Like, oh, okay. Or they pull me aside like, man, like that conversation about music and like 432 hertz and how that can adjust molecules in my body to help me recover. Like, yo, that's deep. Like, I like that. But my main question was always this: can we go home and do things more than just a football camp? right? Because myself and a lot of my teammates included, we were told at a very early age that the only way we would ever be able to feed our family was with athletics, entertainment, right? Being a rapper or selling drugs, right? Well, selling drugs gets you locked up or killed. I mean, being a rapper these days gets you locked up or killed too.
Kill too. Yeah.
And NFL players, 88% are bankrupt within just 2 years of being done.
Is that right?
Yeah. It's
That's
getting a little bit
amazing.
better, but it's still egregious in that way. So I was always like, man, can we go home and do something outside of a football camp? Like, I don't want to go home and hold the Garry Gilliam football camp where 300 kids think that if they they touch our hand, they got the juice, like Space Jam or something. Like, how can we provide a platform, use our platform, our networks, provide resources and opportunities outside of just athletics, right? With our football camp, can we have a financial literacy seminar with it? Can we talk to the athletes about if they do make it, how they can manage their money and how the families won't be detrimental to the progress of those athletes, right? That's one of the biggest reasons why these athletes are broke, their families and their inability, I guess, to process financial literacy, to pay their own bills and things, right?
Yeah.
Can we teach about trades? That was another thing that Milton Hershey had taught us. In order for us to graduate, we all had to be certified in a trade. And I've met a lot of broke athletes. I have not met very many broke plumbers. So in an effort to use my platform, my network, to bring together my buddies, to go into our communities and do things far, far, far beyond just football camps, but to lay the foundation to invest into infrastructure and education, much like Hershey did, and then replicate that into the different communities and environments that we've come from, right? So that's what those different questions were. That was the catalyst of the bridge. Why aren't these other companies investing like Hershey did? Where are the rest of these great campuses, and why are football players specifically only going home and holding football camps, right? How can we fix that? So something I learned at Penn State in business school, they taught us identify a point of pain and solve it with a product, a good, a service, or a model, and you'd be a wealthy individual one day. So all through college, I had actually written up a bunch of different business plans targeting things like the lack of affordable housing, converting food deserts into food oases, providing skills to people, right? These trades, financial literacy outlets, like literally had a bunch of different business plans that I had written up to execute one day. And I realized like, oh, wait, the common denominator with all these different business plans is actually a place, right? It's real estate. And what this is called, it would be called a mixed use development. So I combined all those different business plans into one, and it eventually became what now is the bridge.
And so you did this, or you've done it now in Harrisburg, right?
Yes, we're actually under construction. The project is moving forward nicely. We've secured millions of dollars in grants, tax credits, and it's moving. And we're in the process of actually working out origination, pre-development opportunities in a bunch of other places, not just across the nation, but actually around the world now.
I was going to just ask you, you also mentioned growing the bridge beyond Harrisburg. Like, what's your vision for the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, so the main thing that the bridge looks to do is get site control of old schools, malls, shopping centers, warehouses, land, and convert them into what we call mixed use eco villages. Really, it's adaptive reuse, value add development. And there's no shortage of these available properties across the nation, especially on the East Coast, with the Rust Belt. But through the pandemic, there's been a lot of vacant, underutilized office buildings as well, just shopping centers, just municipalities, land banks, private owners own these properties and don't know what to do with them. They don't know what their highest and best use would be, which in our opinion, is a mixed use. So we now get to work with those elected officials, private developers, owners, investors to help facilitate these public-private partnerships, to make an investment intentionally into these projects, but then also educate the community around them, right? To create this kind of self-sufficient system around each of these developments.
So, Garry, how does the business model work now? Like, are these villages self-sustaining? Do they depend on annual donor support? And what happens when they get, up and running?
Yeah, so their bridges are built to be self-contained, closed-loop eco-village. In the beginning, it's very beneficial to obviously secure public support, grants, tax credits, and things like that. But it's created on the business side to not always have to take those things in. Like any other mixed-use development, rent helps stabilize the workshops that go on within it, the energy production with solar panels. We can actually sell that energy back to the grid. Depreciation, things like that. The tax credits that we qualify for with our focus on affordable housing and veteran housing and senior housing, right? All of those provide then business benefits to not just ourselves, but also our investors and our partners in that world. So it's bringing together what we like. Not it's I believe charity is kind of a broken model. I think it's important for us to focus on social enterprises, right? Much like Hershey, right? I grew up in a system like that where a company made the intentional investment into a community. And again, what it has yielded to this day is the largest educational endowment in the world, right? Like that is nothing to scoff at. And this is going to go in perpetuity because of how Hershey set up the deed, right? Hershey Entertainment, right? Hershey Park, Hotel Hershey, Hershey Foods, right? Any chocolate bar, Reese's cup you've ever eaten, those funds go to supporting that school and its mission, right? So I grew up in it. I know it's possible. So that's why it was replicated and now allows other companies, corporations, athletes to replicate that model into their communities as well.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. That's really exciting. I'm a former real estate developer too, Gary. So, but I built warehouses. I didn't build anything this cool. So, my hat's off to you for doing this. And I do want to ask you a question about that, though. I mean, you know, what is it that kind of inspires you to get out of bed every day and work on these initiatives? Is it just your background, or is it something more than that?
Oh man, probably a complex answer, but I'll try and boil it down. I think it goes back to when I was a young kid and my mom taught me how to fight. And she wasn't just teaching me how to fight to be out there fighting, but mom wanted me to be a bullier of bullies. And if for nobody else, specifically for my older brother, who was born with a pretty serious heart condition, had to have a few open heart surgeries soon after he was born. They saved his life, but he eventually developed cerebral palsy. So mom's like, look, your brother's he talks a little different, going to walk a little different. I need you to protect him, you know. But what that instilled in me very early on was to protect those less fortunate, right? Again, to be a bullier of bullies.
Always.
So as I look out into the world, those bullies are big bullies. They're like systemic bullies that there's not necessarily one person or anybody intentionally doing it, but there were systems and processes that have been put in place that we need to dismantle, right? We need to redo. We got to unlearn and relearn a new system. And I think we all want to be in a system of empowerment where we know if our kids are in a community that they're being educated, that they're safe, that they have food, that that's very, very important, I think, for all of us.
Oh man, I could not agree with you more. I could not agree with you more. Now you got a book you're writing. It's called Undrafted Underdog: How I Made It to the NFL Against All Odds. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm right in the process of writing it. And it goes through all those different points in my life. My mantra is perseverance through adversity, turning your test into a testimony. So all the different values and things that I learned in those different environments and places and spaces that I was in will be involved in the book. A bunch of deeper stories, some things that I don't talk about necessarily publicly will also be in that book. I do anticipate to hopefully release that by the end of this year, if not the beginning of next year. Undrafted underdog, how I made it to the NFL against all odds. I think there's lessons that will be in it that people can take into all different sectors, whether it's corporate, education, family life. And I learned growing up actually from some Navy SEALs when I was playing in the NFL. They always said one of the greatest aspects of a leader is their ability to share their scars, right? Share your scars, share what you've been through and the lessons you've learned for those that are listening to you, those who are coming up behind you, so that's something that I think that this book will be able to give to people, not just, an entertaining story of how I made it to the NFL, but some real tangible things they can take and apply to their own lives.
Yeah, that's very powerful. The NFL hook is a big hook, no question about it. But I think the message is going to be much broader than that. That's for sure. So that's a really good segue, Gary, into my last question. I like to end every interview by asking my guests, what are they grateful for? And sometimes the answers are kind of, sort of about the small things in people's life. I don't know, but gratitude's definitely a big part of my life. So I'd love to hear about your answer. What are you most grateful for, Gary?
Off top of mind, I would say what I'm most grateful for is my family. And most specifically, I would say my mom and her courage to essentially Moses me when I was 8 years old, right? To
Yeah.
toss me in the river, say, good luck, I'm sending you off to a better life. Maybe one day you can come back and help people, So I'm very grateful for her commitment to that, her courage in doing that, and then allowing me to stay at the school. And then outside of that, right, again, the rest of my family, my support network, um, there's been a lot of times in my life that I really wanted to quit, and those around me have encouraged me and let me know that we're all here for a reason, that these tough situations don't last, that they're going to craft you into who you need to be to fight the battles you're going to have to fight one day. So I'm grateful for all the people that I've met. I oftentimes say, nothing of myself is original. I'm a sum of everyone I've ever met, right? So like you included, I look to try and learn things from everybody and apply those into my life. So I'm grateful for God's children, right? I'm grateful for the people around me, and I honor people's perspectives and what they can contribute to each of our lives, because it is very unique and very needed as we all move through this world.
Garry, you're a beautiful person. You really are. And your mom and others raised you to be that beautiful person. I'll tell you, it's what a great story.
Thank you.
What a great story. I just like to thank you for joining me on this episode of Off the Rack. I just want you to know I'm grateful to you for sharing this personal story and the meaningful work that you're really doing in the community. I think you've given us a lot to think about when it comes to, we talked about overcoming adversity and really having a positive influence on others, leading change in our communities. I think that's so powerful. And I hope you enjoyed this as well. I really do. So anyway, I just want you to know how great it's been to have you on.
I have, yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I do enjoy being able to share some of the things that I've been through. So I appreciate you, having me on and talking. This has been a very good experience. So thank you.
By the way, Garry, is there any way that we can become bridge builders and support the work of the bridge?
Oh, absolutely. Our website is thebridgeecovillage.com. If you're local to Harrisburg or any of our other locations that start to populate, you can sign up to volunteer, which allows us to make gardens and have block parties and summer camps and things for the local community. So that's probably the best way to get involved, would just be to, go subscribe to the bridge, follow us on Instagram and Facebook, just continue to share the model, share the story, and get involved. Oftentimes what I say to people, because everyone, when they hear the bridge, they're inspired, they have hope, they want to get involved, and like, hey, Garry, like, how can we support you? And I always turn around and say, look, I don't need your support, but we need your commitment. And by we, what I mean is, the youth in our communities. I mean the families that don't have the resources that they need. Those around you need our commitment to each other, right? It's not about support. We got to make a commitment, whether that's labor, capital, skills, connections, right? All those things are very needed to build these things in all the communities that they're needed in.
Well, folks, as Garry mentioned, it starts with thebridgeecovillage.com. From there, I think you can learn a lot more. I just like to, thank everybody for tuning in today. You can always find more insights about our guests through Off the Rack Plus, our newsletter. And we've got episodes, highlights, transcripts, helpful takeaways, interviews with previous guests, and this interview, of course, with Garry. And also, I'd just like to say, everyone, to please join us also on June 20th. When my guest is going to be Joel Manby, who is the author of Love Works, 7 Timeless Principles for Effective Leaders. Joel is a friend of mine, and he was a CEO of a number of companies, including SeaWorld. And he wrote Love Works to explain the importance of integrating love, the verb, into leadership philosophy of any organization. And by the way, Joel was the first undercover boss. So you're not going to want to miss what he has to say. And so until then, Garry, thank you so much for being on. And I encourage all of you to be human with one another and find a way to have a positive influence on somebody around you each and every day. Thank you so much.